Did you know that The Bride of Frankenstein 1935 was once dismissed by its own director as trash, only to rise from the ashes and become an immortal monument of horror cinema? This is not merely a film. It is a magnificent nightmare where death and rebirth collide beneath the blinding flash of lightning. But behind those mesmerizing images was not the pure glow of creative brilliance. It was a true earthly hell, a place where the leading actor had to scream in agony after shattering his hip on the very first day of filming, while the leading actress was turned into a literal, living mummy bound so tightly she could barely breathe, unable to eat, surviving on sips of water through a straw. And this masterpiece nearly vanished forever, buried by the fury of censorship boards when it dared to cross the ultimate forbidden line, portraying a monster as a saviour. Below are 20 shocking blood and tears truths behind the greatest horror masterpiece of all time. 20. James Whale didn't want to make a sequel. In the memory of classic film lovers, the image of the blazing old windmill at the end of the 1931 film was not only the monster's demise, but a perfect ending to a legend. But for Universal Pictures, those flames marked the beginning of a hunger for profit. When the studio demanded a sequel, director James Whale did something shocking. He refused. To Whale, the story of Frankenstein had already been fully told, and dragging it further would be nothing more than milking an artistic corpse long gone cold. For 4 relentless years, Whale stood aside while the studio tried to lure him back with money and a parade of polished scripts. But in the end, he returned not in surrender, but because he realised he could turn this pressure into revolution. He transformed the sequel into a sharp social satire, infusing it with dark humour and surrealism. The film he never wanted to make became the masterpiece of his lifetime, the brightest jewel in Universal's horror crown, proof that an artist's resistance can sometimes be more powerful than the command of money. 19. Boris Karloff hated that the monster could speak. When Boris Karloff agreed to return for The Bride of Frankenstein, he did not know that his immortality as an icon would be rooted in the instinctive silence of his monster. So when he learned that in the new film the creature would speak, he was genuinely furious. To Karloff, silence was the soul, the protective armour guarding the creature's tragic innocence. Whale disagreed. He wanted the monster to evolve to taste the cost of thought and longing. Cornered Karloff reluctantly entered the recording room and forced out those broken words. Friend, love, alone. Ironically, it was Karloff's real discomfort and resentment that turned those lines into some of the most haunting sounds in cinema history. That halting, breathless voice revealed a painful paradox. The more human the monster became, the more alone he was. Karloff's resistance deepened the role beyond measure. He was not merely acting suffering, he was enduring it through every syllable, transforming a questionable script decision into a performance that moved generations to tears. 18. The scene of the monster, Saving Christ, was banned. Do you remember the scene of the monster wandering through the cemetery? For millions of viewers, it evokes an immense sadness. But few know that director James Whale once intended it to deliver a far greater shock. He planned a moment that would have redefined humanity itself. The monster would not merely look. He would approach, using his crude hands to try to pull the nails free and rescue Jesus from the cross. In his ultimate innocence, the creature would believe that the crucified man was another tortured soul, rejected by the world just like him. But Hollywood, in 1935, was not tolerant enough for such blasphemous compassion. The censorship board immediately condemned the idea as unforgivable sacrilege and forbade even a single frame from being shot. They were terrified at the sight of a so-called demon's creation possessing the heart of a saint. Whale's monster thus became a tragic mirror of faith itself, rejected by both God and mankind, yet the only one capable of pitying the suffering of the Saviour. 17. 5 fateful minutes and a scream that tore through the silence. Even now, I am still astonished to realise that the bride appears only in the film's final moments, yet becomes an icon of an entire culture. Our title character. The bride is on screen for less than 5 minutes. From her first electrically charged breath to the piercing scream that reduces Frankenstein's monster to despair, Elsa Lanchester reshaped cinematic history in a fleeting instant. James Whale was a master of restraint. He understood that absence can be more powerful than presence. He concealed her beneath layers of white bandages, forcing the audience to wait too long and to imagine a perfect beauty reborn from the dead. Yet the tragedy lies here. She is the only universal monster who never harmed anyone. Her only crime was rejection. In the cathedral of cinema, 5 minutes as raw and painfully radiant as that can echo longer than a lifetime. 16. Elsa Lanchester played both Mary Shelley and the bride. Close your eyes and recall the film's opening scene. An elegant room amid a raging storm where Mary Shelley gently recounts her tale by candlelight. But did you notice that the refined face of the woman who wrote the novel and the horrific face of the bride at the end are one and the same? James Whale crafted a subtle artistic deception by casting Elsa Lanchester in both roles, forging an eerie link between imagination and monstrosity. Whale wanted us to see this Mary Shelley dreams the creature into existence, and minutes later, that very dream steps into reality with the same face now twisted by the hand of science. Elsa Lanchester once confided that this dual casting made her feel both like a god holding the power of creation and like a victim trapped within her own creation. When Mary smiles, it is the beauty of intellect. When the bride screams, it is the agony of flesh. This duality poses a haunting question. Do all artists glimpse their own monstrous reflection in what they create? 14. Whoopi Goldberg's prank call. If there is one image that instantly summons memories of gothic horror, it is Elsa Lanchester's towering hair streaked with lightning-shaped flashes of white. For years we believed it was simply an expertly crafted wig. The truth, however, is a story of extreme endurance. The entire architectural mass atop her head was built from her real hair, structured over heavy wire frames and fixed in place with resin glue and industrial chemicals. Each morning, makeup artist Jack Pierce began a grueling ritual lasting hours, sculpting her hair nearly 30 centimeters high. Beneath the scorching studio lights, the mixture of glue and shellac released a sharp scent of smoke and ozone, leaving the actress in a constant state of tension, as though she had truly been struck by lightning. Those grey lightning streaks now are a global symbol were Elsa's own idea, meant to represent the electrical current that awakened her body from the grave. 14. Inspired by Queen Nefertiti. Whenever I look at the bride's regal posture in those black and white frames, I sense a beauty both ancient and strangely futuristic. That is because James Whale instructed his design team to create a being that transcended time itself. Their inspiration came from the bust of Queen Nefertiti, a timeless symbol of ancient Egyptian power and beauty. Her elongated, proud neck and crown-like headdress were reimagined, but through a more grotesque and distorted lens. The fusion created a striking visual effect. The white bandages wrapped around her body evoked a royal mummy resurrected by Dr. Frankenstein's mad science. Whale did not want an ordinary monster. He wanted a queen of the night, Elsa Lanchester's graceful movements concealed a fierce secret. She visited a park to observe swans, studying how they hiss and strike when their territory is threatened. It was this blend of Nefertiti's elegance and a swan's ferocity that transformed the bride's signature hiss into one of cinema's most haunting sounds. The cry of a being breathtakingly beautiful, yet unmistakably dangerous. 13. The white gown and the hell beneath the linen wrappings. There is a silent torment the audience could never perceive while gazing at the bride's pristine white gown wrapped tightly around her slender frame. Behind that ethereal beauty was a literal prison for Elsa Lanchester. She was bound in layers of linen rubber and adhesive from neck to toe so tightly that even the smallest movement like bending or sitting became nearly impossible. The real nightmare began each morning with 3 grueling hours of being dressed, and once the costume was secured, it would not be removed until the final shot of the day. Using the restroom or eating was practically a luxury. Elsa was forced to limit her water intake to the bare minimum, sustaining herself through sips from a straw, because removing the elaborate wrappings was a time-consuming ordeal the studio would never permit. When we see the bride standing rigid and trembling before the monster, part of that anguish may well have come from the suffocating confinement of her body, trapped within those bandages, turning her sacrifice into one of the most tragic chapters in the history of cinematic makeup. 10. Worf didn't even have a chair to sit in. If you have ever looked closely into the eyes of Dr. Henry Frankenstein in this sequel, you may have sensed a weariness that transcends performance. That exhaustion was real. Colin Clive arrived on set with a severely broken leg just before filming began. While the studio scrambled to consider replacements, director James Whale made an uncompromising decision. No one but Clive would portray the Mad Doctor. To accommodate both the director's insistence and Clive's devastating injury, the film's staging was discreetly redesigned. If you watch carefully, Henry Frankenstein rarely walks. He is often seated, leaning against laboratory tables or clutching nearby props for support. The tearing pain seeped into every line of dialogue, shaping a character who appears frail, haunted, and on the brink of collapse. Only 2 years after the film's release, Colin Clive died at the age of 37, carrying Henry Frankenstein's torment with him into eternity. The image of the gaunt doctor standing beside his creation became the lasting imprint of an artist who had drained himself completely for his craft. 9. Wesley Crusher and the Bam from the production office. Many of us have long admired the monster's lumbering, pained gait as he flees from an enraged mob, praising it as the pinnacle of Boris Karloff's physical acting. But the truth is far harsher. On the very first day of filming, during a scene in which he waded through deep water in a dark cellar, Karloff slipped and fractured his hip. Instead of halting production for treatment, the Iron Man of horror chose silence and endurance. Every step the monster takes on screen was in reality Karloff's personal battle against searing pain. The heaviness, the grimaces, the laboured breathing we witness were not carefully choreographed. They were genuine physical responses to a serious injury. 10. The marathon score and 9 breathless hours. Close your eyes and let Franz Waxman's haunting, urgent melodies carry you back to the shadowed halls of that gothic castle. Would you believe that the entire sweeping score, which helped define the sound of horror for nearly a century, was born during a frenzied marathon session lasting just 9 hours? 22 musicians were effectively locked inside the recording room, playing continuously under Waxman's relentless direction. In an atmosphere thick with sweat and tension, shrieking strings and pounding drums emerged from a state of utter exhaustion. Ironically, That very fatigue and urgency infused the music with a raw instability, the perfect sonic companion to the electrically charged resurrection of the bride. 9. Fading scars and the quiet vitality of a living being. There is an extraordinarily subtle detail that is easy to miss. At a glance, the grotesque scars on Frankenstein's monster gradually begin to fade. This was not a continuity error, but a deeply humanistic choice by makeup wizard Jack Pierce. He wanted the audience to feel that although the creature was stitched together from dead body parts, it was truly alive. As the story progresses, Pierce carefully softened the wounds, made the stitches appear less crude, and even allowed the monster's hair to look thicker and more natural. It was a powerful visual metaphor the monster's body was healing itself just as his soul was slowly awakening to profoundly human emotions. 8. A world inside glass jars and the magic of early cinema. For many viewers, the scene in which Dr. Pretorius reveals his tiny people inside crystal jars remains one of the film's most eerie and wondrous moments. In an era when computer effects were still the stuff of science fiction, how did James Whale bring such convincingly miniature beings to life? The answer lay in pioneering double exposure techniques and the almost obsessive precision of the cinematography team. Each tiny person was in fact a real actor. They were filmed separately against a black background and then meticulously composited into the glass jars held by the main actor. It was not digital wizardry, it was pure cinematic illusion, crafted frame by painstaking frame. 7. The final chord, when music became a physical explosion. When you recall the film's final moments, the castle collapsing, hope disintegrating into rubble, do you remember the jolt that ran down your spine at the last thunderous sound? James Whale did not want the audience to merely hear the explosion. He wanted them to feel it reverberate inside their chests. So he demanded a final chord designed with the force of an earthquake. Composer Franz Waxman pushed the orchestra to the absolute limits of volume and drama. The chord erupted so violently and suddenly that during early test screenings, audience members reportedly startled in panic, believing the theatre itself was collapsing. It was not simply a musical ending, it was fate screaming the death cry of a mad dream. Even today, that final chord is considered one of the most haunting sound designs in film history, leaving an aftershock that lingers long after the screen fades to black. 6. An identity erased behind a mysterious question marks. Amid the film's celebrated credits, there is a peculiar absence that has puzzled viewers for decades. While Elsa Lanchester is formally credited for her role as Mary Shelley at the beginning of the film, the bride's credit appears as nothing more than a question mark. The monster's mate. This was no oversight. James Whale deliberately crafted this mystery. By erasing the actress's name, he employed a masterful psychological device, encouraging audiences to perceive the bride not as a performer in makeup, but as an unnamed entity, a stolen soul resurrected from death itself. She was reduced to an enigma, a tragic byproduct of mad ambition. Even after Elsa Lanchester's identity became widely known, that haunting question mark remained a void that echoed the bride's own nameless existence. 5. Elizabeth's scream and the fear of a 17-year-old. When we look at the elegance and dramatic intensity of Elizabeth Dr. Frankenstein's wife, it is difficult to believe that actress Valerie Hobson was only 17 at the time of filming. Surrounded by veteran performers and towering electrical equipment, the young actress faced fears that were never written into the script. Do you remember Elizabeth's piercing screams as the tower begins to collapse? Much of that terror was not performance, it was genuine fear. Hobson's wide-eyed panic and instinctive cries infused the film with raw authenticity. Her youthful vulnerability became the human heartbeat of the story, a fragile presence standing against the storm of reckless scientific ambition. 4. 15 lost minutes and the missing fragments of a legend. There is a quiet melancholy that lingers among film historians whenever The Bride of Frankenstein is discussed, the 15 minutes of footage that have vanished forever. James Whale's original cut ran close to 90 minutes and included scenes he valued most. But Universal ruthlessly trimmed it down to 75 minutes to meet theatrical runtime demands. Those discarded sequences, reportedly featuring deeper religious undertones, more grotesque experiments by Dr. Pretorius, and richly philosophical dialogue, have been completely lost. They are believed to have been destroyed during studio archive purges in the 1940s, erased like fragments of a dream too daring to survive. The Enterprise engine sound was a bathroom exhaust fan. Upon its release, The Bride of Frankenstein immediately fell victim to some of the harshest censorship scissors of its time. It was outright banned in Trinidad, Hungary and Palestine. Sweden cut 25 significant segments, while the United Kingdom initially refused certification, deeming the film too blasphemous and too horrific. Yet art holds a timeless paradox: prohibition often fuels immortality. The more the film was suppressed, the louder its reputation grew, crossing borders, defying moral gatekeepers, and outliving the prejudices of its era. 2. The Erased Massacre and the Anonymous Dead. In early drafts of the screenplay, the monster and the mad experiments surrounding him were responsible for the deaths of 21 victims, an astonishingly grim tally for 1930s cinema. Whale wanted audiences to confront the raw, destructive power of a forsaken being, each fallen life marking another bruise upon humanity's conscience. But under suffocating pressure from censors, Universal was forced to conduct a kind of editorial purge. Scenes were trimmed, deaths reduced, and the final body count lowered to just 10. What remained was still powerful, but a darker, more uncompromising vision had been quietly buried. 1. 46 Days, $400,000 and the Making of History. Compared to today's billion-dollar blockbusters, a $400,000 budget and a 46-day shooting schedule in 1935 may seem modest. But recall the overwhelming sight of the laboratory crackling with electricity, or the tower collapsing in a thunderous convergence of sound and fury. In less than 2 months, James Whale and his team achieved what many modern directors require years and digital technology to accomplish. They built a universe. From limited time and resources, they gave birth to a bride, not as an industrial product, but as a living, breathing entity with a soul. Nearly a century has passed since that winter night in 1935, when Elsa Lanchester's scream first echoed through dimly lit theatres. This masterpiece reminds us that immortal art is rarely born from comfort. It is forged from adversity, from the ultimate sacrifices of artists, and from the courage to speak a truth in a world intoxicated by comforting lies. And you, of these 20 facts, which one haunts you the most? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next shocking cinematic dossier.